When did you become aware of this video that showed that no one had gone in and out of the cell?
Recently.
So why was it recent, though? I mean, if this death was, how long ago was this death?
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. This week, we're covering a big one that got a lot of requests. So recently, the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and one of the topics that they discussed that got a lot of attention in the media and in the public eye was Jeffrey Epstein and the strange circumstances surrounding his untimely demise. Many viewers appreciated Patel's focus on transparency, but others noticed that some of his answers felt incomplete and some of his behaviors odd. But what do his body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal, and what does he actually think about what happened to Epstein? Let's dive right in. Now, for those of you who don't know, very quickly in a nutshell, Jeffrey Epstein was a very wealthy financier who was facing some extremely serious criminal charges and whose body was found in his jail cell in 2019. Now, although this was officially ruled as self-inflicted, there were some very strange details about this case. The cameras outside his cell were reportedly malfunctioning. The guards who were on duty at the time fell asleep and then later admit to falsifying records, and these are just some of the details that made a lot of people question the legitimacy of what was being said. Now, for clarity, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI that we're about to look at in these clips, believes that this deed was in fact self-inflicted. He doesn't subscribe to the theory that this was orchestrated, that the evidence was tampered with, or that somebody somehow made their way into the jail cell to commit this act. But now my special guest and I are going to look at his answers and how he defends that position and the behaviors that go along with it. Let's go. I'm super excited to welcome this week's guest to the channel. He is a best-selling author who has worked with and trained CIA, DoD, and FBI agents, and he's the co-creator of the #1 online course on the subject of body language. Please welcome back to the channel by popular demand, my friend, Scott Rouse. What's going on, man?
How are you?
Good.
Excellent. Hey, we haven't talked about me and my brother coming to your show in Vegas. I'm not okay with that still, man. I don't know what happened for some of that stuff. I don't know where you start to be doing some of that stuff. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So, yeah, for context, Scott, the last time I saw Scott was in Las Vegas. He came to my show there with his brother. And after the show, by the way, you were like frozen. Like you weren't speaking words. You were like, I was like a little concerned.
Well, it's not funny because I don't know how you, not that I know how to do this, but I don't know how you did some of that stuff, man. I don't know. I'm thinking about it now and I can't get past some of the things I saw. We couldn't figure any of that out.
Well, you're going to have to shake it off because we've got a lot of analysis to get to in this video here this week. So let's jump into that.
All right.
Soon after Epstein's death in August, 2 of the CCTV cameras outside his cell had malfunctioned and were being examined by the FBI.
I'm not saying every single camera in the place was working. I'm saying we've got footage and you're getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can make up your own mind. And
right.
The theories can continue. But my job
So
is to give
you
the
became
information.
aware of this footage recently.
The ones that we're looking at, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but this is like an article from quite a while ago that was saying that the footage was mistakenly erased.
Look, I mean, it goes back to the same, ask the people that were in power then. I mean, I get it that you want to hold me to account for their actions. And
No, I'm not
you,
saying,
not you.
I'm not saying that.
Not you, just the public in general, and that's okay.
What's confusing to everybody today, first of all, it's very confusing because AI can kind of make anything. You know, which has got to be a bizarre position for you to be in when you're looking at videos. I mean, I've watched Viking videos. It looked
Well,
real
I
as
can
fuck.
tell you after having looked at it, this ain't going to be AI.
You don't think so?
It's just not great. You know, it's like if it were AI, like someone wanted to come in and make it, they'd make it better.
But why would you make it better when people could, you could have ambiguous footage that is, totally generated by AI. I mean, AI can generate blurry images. AI can generate night vision. AI can generate essentially anything that's already existed, like really shitty 1984 VHS tapes. They can do that.
They can. But I'm telling you, I'm giving you the tape from the tape.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just like I'm giving you the documents from the vault, just like I'm giving you information to Congress on COVID origins or what have you. What we find is what you're getting.
Okay.
Scott, before we dive into this analysis, I want to clarify something. When I called you to be on this, I called you because you have experience working with all of these agencies, but I wanted it to be very, very clear that I don't want any bias on the channel ever. And I want that to be very clear for the viewers that you're on the channel to call out what you're seeing and nothing else.
Yeah, that wouldn't be right. I'm not about that. There are certain channels, and I do 3 or 4 news channels every week, several times, and there are a couple that I refuse to do because they've tried to steer me towards saying things I didn't want to say, or say things that would make somebody else believe what I was saying was true when I knew that wasn't going to be true, what they wanted me to say. I don't know how to say it any clearer. But so no, I'm not about fluffing anything at all for anybody's side. I call it like I see it.
Beautiful. And that's what we're all about here at the Behavioral Arts, unbiased analysis. And this clip is interesting because we start to get his opinion on what happened here. And he's definitely leaning towards this being exactly what was represented, that Epstein took his own life. So talk to us about what we're seeing here with the behaviors, what you're getting. Just go.
There's a lot going on here, but I think the most confident statement we see is when he says, "We've got footage and you're getting it." Now, and we know that he's fairly confident with that because he gets that dead eye lock going with Joe, and he doesn't look away, and his cadence, voice tone, his volume are strong. Not that because when you look away, you're lying. A lot of people think that's true. If you look away at me, you break eye contact, it means you're lying. It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, research shows that some people, when they're lying too, will keep looking at you because they want to make sure you believe them. So also we're seeing these little shoulder shrugs, and that indicates he doesn't know what the theories are that everybody's talking about, these other people that are adding theories to that. Now, we know he's confident with that answer about the AI or his statement about the AI videos because we see a full-on Duchenne smile, and that's a smile of confidence. And we know it's a Duchenne smile because it follows the protocol that a Duchenne smile shows you, which is the eyes are squinted the way they should be. This little part of your mouth here, these 2 parts come up exactly as far as they should come up. There are a lot of things with the Duchenne smile. You should Google that so you'll know the details of it. But that's how we know he's being confident there. His confidence with this, talking about the AI, is fairly high. And we're going to see confidence is a little bit lower as we move along some videos here in a few minutes. Spidey, what do you got?
Right. So that's one of the things that I want to start with is his confidence with this AI thing I thought was so bizarre. Rogan's going, there's a possibility of AI. And he's saying, no, this isn't AI because the quality is too low. And I thought that was really bizarre. Like, how is the FBI, the director of the FBI, going to equate low quality to no, it's impossible. AI can never be low quality. And Rogan even pushed back on that and said, well, no, AI could be low quality. It could look like anything you want it to be. Rogan was talking about AI as in maybe the footage you have is already modified with AI, but he's going, no, you're going to get what we have. We're not going to mess with this thing at all. And I think this is because he's constantly aware that no matter what narrative the FBI puts out there are skeptics out there who are always just going to come up with these theories, which he literally said earlier, if we listen to one of his answers.
I'm saying we've got footage and you're getting it. Mm-hmm. And then you can make up your own mind. And the theories can continue. But my job...
He says, and you'll make up your own mind. And pause, and we see a shrug both with the mouth and the shoulder. The theories will continue. So the moment he talks about the footage or his opinion about that footage, his mind immediately goes to, you'll make up your own mind, and the theories are going to continue regardless of what we put out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Did you ever see, do you remember that HBO autopsy show? Dr. Michael Baden, he's a famous forensic
I don't think I've seen
scientist. So he's a pathologist, and he reviewed the case, and it was his determination that it was a homicide because of the way his neck was broken. Mm-hmm. And what he said was it was indicative of a ligature strangulation, and it was because of the positioning on the neck where the marks were, that it wasn't indicative of someone hanging by their weight, which had been higher on the chin. And there's a specific break of the bones and the vertebrae that's consistent with someone who is just...
I haven't seen it. I'll definitely take a look at it because that's part of my job.
You haven't seen that?
The report on that? No, I haven't looked at that.
Did you see any? Was there any other autopsy done other than the official one?
Not to my knowledge, but if there was, you'll get it. And that's what we're doing.
All right, as we look at Patel, we got to keep in mind he's paying attention to every word he says. He's measuring everything he says because he's the head of the FBI, and there's some things he can't talk about. So when we see his illustrators disappear, if you'll look back to earlier, if we'll look at his baseline, if Spotty, if you'll put up a picture, a little clip of his baseline, we'll see a lot of illustrators in there. His hands are moving, things are coming forward, coming back. And that lets us know he's emphasizing specific words and phrases. But when you're focused on what you're saying, those things tend to go away, which doesn't mean he's being deceptive. It just means he's focused on what he's saying. It doesn't mean one thing or the other, one direction or the other as far as deception or being honest about something. And then when he says, I haven't seen it, no, I haven't looked at that. He knows there are reports, but he hasn't looked at specifically that one report. So, and right after that, he clears his throat. So that suggests to me he's a little bit uncomfortable there.
The report on that? No, I haven't looked at that.
Did you see any?
So, and with that quick little shoulder shrug and backing up a little bit, that lets us know that he's watching everything he says and he's on guard for protecting what he says. Because again, he's got to be careful. Some things he can't talk about or can't get specific on. The head shakes no when he's saying, I'm going to do this or that. Those are in rhythm with what he's saying. Those are confirmation shakes and affirmation shakes. When someone says, yes, I'm going to go, that's one thing because their head is going, yes, I'm going to go. Their head is in rhythm with what they're saying. But if they say, yes, I'm going to go, and they back up a little bit maybe, and you see that head just keep nodding after they're finished speaking, that you could see as a deception, but we're not seeing that here. What do you got, Spidey?
One thing that I noted, same as you, but I'm going to give him a pass on, is that clearing of the throat. Because normally when someone's talking and it's not in their baseline to clear that throat, and all of a sudden they're doing it, this could be a very, very good indication of stress. In this case, I'll give him a pass on it because he literally just lit a cigar. We heard the torch, and we see the smoke coming up, and they're having cigars.
Scientist. So he's a pathologist, and he reviewed the case, and it was his determination that it was a homicide because of the way his neck was broken.
So in that moment, I'll give him a pass on that one, just because we know that he just lit that cigar. So it was in the notes, but yeah. One thing that I want to throw in at the end here is how, not just here, but throughout this entire interview, he has a tendency that the moment he feels that he's lacking information, he immediately compensates with transparency. And you're going to see him do this as a pattern again and again. Anytime he feels a little self-aware because, he didn't know something, he immediately goes to somewhere along the lines of, but I'm going to give you that. You're going to see that. We're going to show you that. You're going to have everything you need to see. And he did it twice in this clip. First, he said about the report, I haven't seen it. I'll definitely take a look at it. Immediately, he goes to that thoroughness. And then later, a little more obviously, when he's asked, was there any other autopsies? He said, not to my knowledge, but if there was, you'll get it. Always immediately, like, no, but if it's there, I'm going to look into it. But if it's there, you're going to get it.
Dr. Baden, a former New York City medical examiner and a Fox News contributor, said, I have not seen in 50 years where that occurred in suicidal hanging case. Findings by Dr. Baden were strongly disputed by the city's chief medical examiner, Dr. Barbara Sampson, who previously ruled that Mr. Epstein's death on August 10th in the Metropolitan Correctional Center was a suicide. I stand firmly behind our determination of the cause and manner of death in this case. She said her office had done a complete investigation, taking into consideration information gathered by law enforcement in making the determination.
So this is a perfect example of going back to my public defender and prosecutor days. Mm-hmm. This is what we call a war of experts. You can always find someone to come in and say the opposite.
Right.
And I used to do it all the time. I mean, I represented some of the worst humans that you can possibly imagine on earth. Literally. The guys that were children from Mexico into America. And you could put up a professional expert to say, and this is what's going to go on forever. And my job is not the forever. My job is to get you absolutely everything that we can give you. And that's what we're going to do.
When did you become aware of this video that showed that no one had gone in and out of the cell?
Recently.
So why was it recent, though? I mean, if this death was, how long ago was this death? 2 years? 2019?
2019.
Oh, really? Why time flies. So 6 years.
Well, again, that's part of what I'm going to try to answer for you.
Okay, so I saw something here that I've very rarely seen in behavioral analysis. And there's something that in interrogation or in interviews we call convincing statements or resume statements. And this is when somebody says something to build their character up. So instead of talking about the topic, they build their character up so you feel that they're more honest and more forthcoming and more positive and all these things. I've very rarely seen an unconvincing statement. So here when he was talking about the war of the experts, he talked about how he's represented some of the worst people on earth. And we see this kind of throwaway negation gesture with the palm outwards. Like, bar none, these are some of the worst people. Like, it's non-negotiable. And he didn't even complete his sentence while he was talking about that, but he said, you can put up a professional expert to say, and he didn't really finish the sentence, but it really felt like he was saying, you could put someone up there to say pretty much anything.
And you could put up a professional expert to say, and this is what's going to go on forever.
And I think he realized that it's not a great look, so he didn't even complete the sentence and he shifted gears. Another thing that I'm very stuck on when it comes to this Dr. Bodden report that suspects that there was foul play is if Kash Patel has seen footage that shows that nobody went into that cell, because he said that numerous times, that there's no way anybody broke into that cell, and that he has footage that shows that. Why would he even entertain this report? Why would he even say, yeah, I'll take a look at that? The example that my mind goes to is this. Scott, if I've seen footage of you eating a rack of ribs and like a full plate of Hattie B's fried chicken, which I'm pretty sure I've seen that footage.
You've seen that.
Yeah. And somebody comes to me and says, I have a report here that shows that Scott is vegetarian. I wouldn't say, you know what, I'm going to take a look at that. I would go, no, if that's what that report says, that report is incorrect. To me, it would make sense that if he was really convinced, right then at that point, he would go, but in this case, this person is incorrect, unfortunately, because there's no way anybody went into that cell. So yeah, for me, there's a little bit of that missing. And the last thing I want to talk about here is, again, at the end, when he couldn't remember the year that this happened, right? So Rogan said, when did it happen? 2 years ago? It's 6 years ago. And Kash Patel didn't have the answer. He was like, I don't know, a couple of years. And immediately when he didn't have that answer, he went right back once again to, that's what I'm going to try to answer for you. Not the year, but like, these are the answers that I'm going to try to get for you.
How long ago was this death? 2 years? 2019?
2019.
Oh, really? Why time flies. So 6 years.
Well, again, that's part of what I'm going to try to answer for you.
So again, the moment he feels like he doesn't have answers and it seems like he's not informed, he immediately goes to transparency and saying, I'm going to give you everything we've got. So there are all these little things that to me are convincing me that he's formed an opinion, he hasn't looked that much more into it, and I think, and Scott, you let me know if you agree, I think he personally doesn't care about this case as much as the public cares about this case. Because if we look at the way he talks about the fentanyl earlier in the conversation, he has the numbers, he has the facts, we see more passion in the way that he talks about it. And I think that's why we're getting a lot of this, I don't know this, but when I do, you'll know. And when I find this, you're gonna have it. And I'm gonna show you everything. Because it's kind of a way to deter away from the fact that he just doesn't have that much information on this case that everyone's interested in, but maybe not him as much. What do you think of that, Scott?
I agree with you. Yeah, you're spot on with that. Really agree with you on that. But one of the things I want to focus on are his regulators and illustrators, because when he's talking, he's a charismatic guy, and being in the FBI, that's a little bit. There's the politics of getting the higher ranks in the FBI. I think one of the ways of doing that is being a little charismatic. And so we're seeing these illustrators and these regulators. Illustrators are when you emphasize specific words and phrases, like I did just then, specific words and phrases. When you use a regulator, you're stopping something. So you hold your hand up to make sure everything stops, or you'll point and wave or something like that. We're seeing him use both of these, especially earlier when we look at those clips of his illustrators. And he's really big with them. He's really good at it, because not only does he hold his hand up as a regulator to hold on just a minute, which is what charismatics do to get your attention and hold it, they get the eye contact going. And then when that happens, they'll deliver their information. So when you're doing that, it's important to keep your illustrator still and your eye contact happening, so you lock with that person. Now, when he says, my job is to get you absolutely everything we can give you, then we see his not only illustrating, but we see his body illustrate as well. We see, or come through not as a regulator, but more of an illustrator, because when he illustrates, his whole body moves. It's nothing big, but if you'll pay attention to it, you'll see what I'm talking about. That suggests that he's really into that and he's committed to that. So when Joe said, when did you become aware of this video? Kash keeps looking down because he's structuring what he's thinking. That's internal dialogue as he's speaking, because he's got to make sure he doesn't say anything he can't say. So we're back to measuring his words. So he's being very careful about that. That's why things kind of slow down on him right then. So that, I think I'll end my part on that one there. What do you think about that?
Yep, love what you said with the illustrators. And yeah, he illustrates with the whole body as he drives the point home and saying, and that's what we're gonna do. Like, I'm serious. But even just before that, we see this illustrator with the finger downwards on the table going, my job is to give you absolutely everything we can. So we have this downwards, like, you know, I'm putting it down on the table, we're not leaving anything behind. And usually this finger outwards is pretty aggressive. You know, like we do this in discipline, like this. It's called batoning. And it goes back to the fact that in the way that we evolved, it reminds us of like a weapon. Like, you know, you might hold a stick or a sword. So the research on this shows that it's typically something that we perceive as quite adamant, quite aggressive. And here it's like, we're gonna give you absolutely everything. Like, there's passion behind this. And yes, you're right, it's confident, but he's confident about what he's gonna find and what he's gonna give in ways that he's not confident about what he knows now and what he's basing his opinions on. That's the confidence shift that I'm seeing.
I agree with you.
If someone was in a position where a guy could release information that could potentially damage the most wealthy people on earth, you would have a concerted effort that's unprecedented.
Sure.
You'd have the resources that we couldn't even possibly comprehend, all pointing towards eliminating this one person that it could be done.
But I mean, so many people have been implicated, right, already. And some of that information, what they did to Prince Andrew and everybody else is already out there. And so that's the conspiracy stuff that me and Bongino and the folks have to say, look, we will give you everything we can, and then we will have done our job. Also, if I had a shred, me, Kash Patel, had a shred of evidence, the Russiagate guy, the Jan 6 guy, the COVID origins guy, had a shred of evidence that this guy was murdered, I would be the first guy to bring this case hard and fast. And I would even doing press conferences every week on it. Mm-hmm. The first guy. That's what I'm asking people to play out to their logical conclusion. I'm not Comey. I'm not McCabe. I'm not the guy that was in the seat before. I have a wildly different background. I've been putting out the truth my entire career. Why would I risk all of it on this guy?
I believe you catch the letter.
All right, when Kash is talking about the conspiracy stuff that's already out there, we see what is usually looked or thought of as contempt. And that's when one side of the face goes up. And the studies show that suggests it's contempt. But what we know now is with updated studies, quite often that one side of the face going up could be a combination of expressions at the same time. For example, right there. Now, what that is he's dismissing those other thoughts, those other things that are going on. So that's dismissive behavior. We'll see that quite often in mothers, or when their child's done something they can't believe, they go, well, that's just what he does. Those kind of things. Now, both sides of the mouth tighten. We'll see that there. At the same time, the lips are compressed, and he shakes his head no, like that. And he looks to the side. Again, that's dismissive behavior as well. When he says, we'll give you everything, we see a chin jut. Like that.
Say, look, we will give you everything.
Usually when you see a chin jut, that's someone being aggressive or they're making a point. But what he's doing here is saying, we're going to give you everything. Instead of doing something like this, pushing it all forward, he's pushing forward with his chin. That's the impression I have of that. Then he gives a resume statement of who he is. And then he says, if that guy was murdered, I would be the first guy to bring the case in and I'd go hard on it, in other words. So what he's done here with the resume statement is he's built his case as an attorney would. Usually, or a lot of times when you hear someone give a resume statement first, they're getting ready to be deceptive because they want to build it up and say, you've got to believe me because. But here he's saying, if you listen to what he's saying, I'm this guy, and if this had happened, I would do this. So this sounds more like a mission statement of something he's passionate about than something he's getting ready to be deceptive about.
Yep, and this is actually, I had in my notes, Scott, I'm with you, where it was one of the more positive things that he said in the entire interview for me, because he is voluntarily attaching transparency to his reputation. Nobody asked him that. He volunteered that. He said, look, if this was happening, I wouldn't hide it. I'd be the first one on the news every week going after this. Why would I hide this? So he's volunteering that connection between his honesty and his reputation. So if in fact there was something he was being deceptive about and it eventually came out, people go back and say, oh, no. Do you remember what you said on Rogan? You said that you're the type of person who would never hide this kind of thing. Turns out that you were hiding this kind of thing. So if in fact he's hiding something, what he just said makes it look much worse. Now that said, right in the middle of this mission statement, there was a strange little cluster of behaviors, and it happened right around the time he said, I've been putting out the truth my entire career. Because we see not just one, but 2 face touches. And face touching is really important, and you have to consider baseline. Some people, when they talk, very much have their hands around their face. It's a way to adapt to stress. But he's not someone who does this a lot. In fact, Scott, to your point, you said he's very good with those illustrators, those regulators. He's often out here as he's talking, or he's still. But this, we see 2 quick face touches in the same moment. And one of them literally is over here blocking the mouth. So it's not just face touching, it's also mouth blocking. And mouth blocking is an interesting behavior because ever since we're very little, when we say something that we're not supposed to say, the hands come up and block the mouth, whether it's a swear word or we blurt someone's secret out. And as we get older, we get better at it. We still have that reflex for the hand to shoot up, but we're better at hiding it. One of the best examples I've ever seen of this in my life is when Amber Heard, during her deposition, slipped up on something that she wasn't supposed to say regarding how TMZ got some information. Both her hands shot up like this as she stopped talking, and then she went to her hair to make it seem like that's what she was going to do. It was behaviorally such a perfect moment. And here we're seeing Kash Patel as he talks about putting out the truth his entire career. This comes up here, followed with this very nervous chuckle. It's not that same full-face smile you observed earlier, Scott. It's a little bit more nervous. It's a bit more stress behind it. Now, as I consider what he said earlier in a previous answer about how he had experience as a lawyer defending the worst humans on earth, his words, and how he could get professionals to testify to pretty much any position. Take to that and add the fact that he's the director of the FBI, and there's definitely some information that he's seen that he's not cleared to talk about. So by law, he can't talk about it. I think we're seeing the stress here because what he's saying is, I've made a career of being truthful to the max of my capacity. As a lawyer and as a director of the FBI, there are certain limits that I have, but within those limits, my career has been all about telling the truth. So I think that's why we're seeing this mouth blocking and the stress around that.
Now, the problem is we've been fuming on this conspiracy for so long. And we love conspiracies, don't we?
No,
as a country,
it's
there's
good,
so
right?
much fun.
I mean, they make
JFK tapes. Come on, release the documents. We all love them. We love them. We love UFO ones. We love everything. We love the craziest conspiracies. They're exciting. We don't want to hear that he tried to kill himself in July and then succeeded in August. And look, I could imagine why the guy wanted to kill himself. He was going to jail for the rest of his fucking life, and in jail, for children are not treated well.
And also, by the way, most Americans haven't, nor should they. Have you ever spent 1 minute in segregated housing?
No.
It's the worst, the absolute worst.
Well, this is something you caught, Spidey, and I was really impressed with this. You caught one of the biggest expressions of contempt I've ever seen. In fact, it's so big, Joe Rogan almost looks like Popeye when it does it. Seriously, earlier we were talking about the differences in contempt and things that look like contempt. There's no question about what's happening here. And it's so great to have an example that's this big. Like I said before, this is the biggest one I've ever seen. So when you see that one part of the face go up, one side of the face, and that's contempt, the asymmetric facial expression, that's it, writ large. That's as big as it gets. I don't think you could do it any larger than that. It's almost comical, but it's real. He really does feel that. And he talks about his kids a lot, about what he would do to somebody that harmed one of his children. So that makes total sense to me from a body language perspective and from a neurological perspective as well.
Yep, great point. And it's totally different from some other things we see where there's a bit of like moving of the mouth, or like sometimes when we're thinking, go to one side. This is, you see that scrunch, you see the eyes almost closing. So yeah, that's contempt. The thing I wanted to touch on really quickly here is how he talks about in the beginning conspiracy theories and how exciting they are sometimes. So it's easier to believe in that or lean more towards that because of how much more exciting it is than what might be the boring truth. So they're more compelling. We want to believe those things. And this is going to play into my conclusion a little bit. This idea that sometimes we believe in something or want to believe in something so much that we cherry pick evidence and we get locked into something called confirmation bias because we've already made our decision and we're only looking for evidence that supports that decision. So let's just put a pin in that because it's going to play into what I think of this whole situation.
What is the chain of custody? Is there evidence that there is video? Is there evidence that it was moved around, stored, protected from people looking at it?
You're going to get all that information. That's literally what we're putting together. And we're going to give you every single thing we have and can. And that's the whole point. We can't fill gaps by making stuff up, and we're not going to do that.
And you have to be methodical.
And we have to be. That's the other thing, right? We're reviewing not just the video. We're reviewing everything as meticulously as we can, because that's what we owe the American people. That's our job. And I don't want to rush to the sticks or the podium and just say, hey, look what we found.
Right.
And then be like, oh, sorry, I forgot the 4 seconds. If we miss 4 seconds, they'll be like, oh, well, it's in the 4 seconds you missed.
Right.
So I'm
How much can you talk about what you've seen?
Not yet.
This one's really interesting because everything starts to change here. We see everything getting smaller, everything getting quieter. We see his illustrators go from these hardcore big movements, they slow down and they land a lot slower, which lets us know there's a lack of confidence there. When he says everything we have and can, when he says can, he whispers can. That's fading facts. That's something he really doesn't want to say, but he's saying it anyway. And we often see that in low confidence statements. But everything changes here. Spidey, what are you saying? I'm sure you're seeing tons of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are even some things that you told me while we were discussing this that you didn't mention here, but you saw that at some point after a statement, he even moves his chair back, which contributes to this becoming smaller, taking up less space, which is something we do when we feel very self-aware. And this is called pelvic distancing. And you could see this in the real world. When you see someone losing interest in a conversation or the interest is turning somewhere else, one of the first parts of the body that you see pulling away is that lower abdomen. We're kind of subconsciously distancing. So we see that. A few other things. Basically, this is all one big non-answer, because Rogan is asking him, is there evidence? What's the chain of command? Where's this video? How can we? And he immediately, without talking about whether the video exists or doesn't exist or where it is or who has it, immediately goes back to what I said earlier, transparency. We're going to give the American people everything because that's what they deserve, and we're going to give everything we have and can. And this whole thing is just him saying, I want to be transparent, I want to be open. There's other stressful behaviors. At some point, we see a lip retraction. In fact, Scott, it happens exactly after what you said. Have and can, we have that fading fact. And then we see that lip retraction right away. The lips go inwards like this, which is something that we see often when there's something that we can't fully be transparent about or open about or holding something in. We see those lip retractions start.
We're going to give you every single thing we have and can. And that's the whole point.
Let's talk about that contempt we saw for just a second, where he says, I don't want to rush to the sticks or the podium, and then that's when we see the contempt go up. And that's a real contempt as well, expression of contempt. And so he's saying, he doesn't like it when somebody does that, when somebody rushes to give their answer, rushes to give any information when they don't have all the correct or proper information. And he's not going to do that. That goes back to what you were saying about how he values transparency over the things he doesn't know and does know at this time.
Yep. Absolutely agreed. All right, Scott. So we've seen a lot of really interesting stuff here, and I'm going to give my conclusion right at the end of this video. But before you go, give us your quick conclusion. What do you think we've seen here today?
This has been really interesting because we've seen all kinds of body language in here. It's really interesting. We've seen everything from contempt to some really great illustrators, some regulators. We've seen turtling. We've seen all the things we usually talk about. And the things we've seen as far as stress goes doesn't necessarily mean he's being dishonest or being deceptive. We've seen him keep information in that we know he can't give away, that he can't talk about because that information hasn't been cleared yet. So that makes sense. We've seen him speak freely. We've seen him talk with no problem at all when his illustrators get really big. And his cadence and his voice tone, his volume are all solid and loud. And he's relaxed. He's smoking a cigar. We've seen all these things that show us he's going through these waves of emotions psychologically to tell us that at the same time he's being free and open, he's still watching what he's saying. So I don't think, I'm not under the impression we've seen deception. I'm not under the impression that we've seen someone being totally honest. I think it sort of rides the line the whole time, which I think is what he's trying to do. I think he wants to be honest. I think and when he says I'm being as honest as I can be, when he says things like that, because that's all he can tell us. So in other words, he is being as honest as he can be in this situation. So it doesn't mean he's not an honest guy. It doesn't mean he's not a good guy. It means he's giving us all the information he possibly can without getting in trouble for giving us too much information.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great little wrap up and a good reminder that sometimes things look like it might be something, but it's good to just take pause and say, yeah, it still can be that, but let's consider what else it could be and really apply critical thinking. So I love that note, Scott. I want to thank you for joining us. And I think the information you gave is so valuable, especially coming from someone who's worked with these agencies and kind of knows how they operate and think and the things they're allowed to talk about, things they're not allowed to talk about. So thanks a lot. And I will see you on the next collab.
All right. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you having me. And after this, you're going to have to show me a card trick.
Okay, so that was Scott's conclusion, and here's mine, which is similar to his, but has a couple of differences, which I think I kind of sprinkled in throughout the analysis, but here it is. So earlier, Joe Rogan was talking about how conspiracy theories work and how we love them. And sometimes we're locked into a theory so much and we're so excited about it that we don't really entertain theories or evidence that don't fit into that narrative. And we often do something called cherry picking evidence, which is you pick and choose which evidence you're going to pay attention to because we're stuck in something called confirmation bias. And although we very often see this with people who very much are drawn towards conspiracy theories, like Joe Rogan was talking about, I think in this case, we're seeing that same thing, but moving away from the conspiracy theory when it comes to Kash Patel. I think that for whatever reason, he locked in early that this was self-inflicted. He believed that, whether it's because he saw some information or somebody that he really trusts told him that, or he saw something on this footage that convinced him of this. He even talks in the interview about having intimate knowledge with that jail and knowing how difficult it is to get in there. So for whatever reason, I think he made that conclusion in his mind, and I think he's not really entertaining anything that contradicts it very seriously. I also, like we discussed, think that he hasn't really done very much of a deep dive on this. I mean, he didn't know the year that this occurred. He keeps talking about how I'm going to get you this, I'm going to look into that. He has very little answers and a lot of promises about transparency. So I do think that he wants to be transparent with this. And if he suspects that something was foul play big time, that he will come out and disclose that. He talks about how important that is to him. But I think a lot of the stress that we're seeing is from the fact that he just isn't that informed and hasn't really done his due diligence when it comes to this case. I also think that he's very aware of the fact that some conspiracy theories are not very founded, but this one really is. I think that's why he's not very strongly contradicting the opposing narrative. I think he understands that a lot of these circumstances are very strange, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of stress in his answers, because he knows that credible, informed people will be able to come after his position in a credible way. Now, before we all run to the comments to continue the conversation, please keep in mind that no matter how certain we feel about our conclusions, nobody can really know. Unless somebody was there looking at this jail cell when it happened, and I don't think anybody was, nobody can know for a fact, no matter how certain we feel. Certainty is the enemy of critical thinking. So whether we're really focusing on the fact that nobody could have really broken into this cell and he had attempted this kind of behavior before, and that he was gonna face some very serious charges that he probably really didn't want to, so that makes us very certain that he did this himself, versus the fact that the cameras malfunctioned coincidentally and the guards were asleep, and that a lot of powerful people would have wanted this person silenced, and that makes us very certain that there's foul play. At the end of the day, nobody can really know. The best we can all do is critically think and have these conversations and look at the behaviors of people who have the information to try to see what's going on. And please, please keep in mind that there aren't any behaviors that we could see that allow us to know with certainty when someone's being deceptive. That's just a myth that's been spread by TV shows, movies, and misinformed media, but those behaviors don't exist. If they did, trials and interrogations would be much, much shorter. So whenever we think we see something suspicious and we want to go, oh my God, that's for sure deception, it could be, it absolutely could be, but it can also just be stress due to other things. It's true that lying causes the cognitive load to increase and lying causes stress. But you know what else causes stress? Stress. So we often have to think about, okay, what else could be happening here? Is the person stressed because it's deceptive, or is the person stressed because they don't know the answer where they should, or are they stressed about the topic for some other reason? We always have to be very critical and ask the right questions that eventually get us to the truth. We can't look at little signs and go, oh my God, that's for sure deception. That's not how it works. So keeping that in mind and respecting conflicting opinions, let me know in the comments what you think. Not just what you think about what really happened with Epstein, but what do you think about Kash Patel's answers here and why we're seeing this fluctuation in very confident when it comes to, I'm going to show you this and I'm going to be transparent because that's my job, to this kind of wavering confidence when he's asked about the details. What's going on here? Let me know in the comments and I will see you on the next one.